Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. Today we're going to review the Stephen King book Insomnia. Um, this book centers on a senior citizen named Ralph Roberts. He lives in the city of Derry, Maine, so this is the same city that the book It is based in. So if when you read it, you'll see, if you're familiar with it, you'll hear about certain like geographical things in Derry that are from it, and a couple of characters. He doesn't dwell much on the characters of Derry that are similar with it, but you'll run into them from time to time. At the beginning of the book, Ralph lives with his wife Carolyn, and Carolyn is dying, and so at the beginning of the book, Ralph is just kind of he goes on long walks, and he's walking along, and he runs into his neighbor Ed Deepno, and Ed becomes really agitated with another man. I don't know if this man is really ever named. I think he's named in description. And Ed is really kind of, again, he's just a normal, mild-mannered man, according to Ralph, or that's how Ralph usually thinks of him, but he goes kind of like ballistic on this man, and he claims that this man who holds fertilizer in the back of his truck is holding dead babies, and he's goes on and on about women who commit abortions and how that's wrong, and they're all baby killers and things. So Ralph helps calm Ed down, and so he goes on his merry way, and they part and things like that. But Ralph's like, that's really weird. So kind of fast forward a little bit. Caroline has died, and Ralph is now a widower, excuse me, and he is beginning to have insomnia, where he'll get up, he'll go to bed at maybe 11 o'clock at night and get up at, like, it began at 5 in the morning, and then it gets a little earlier where it starts, 4:30, 4, and I think eventually when he's all done, by the book's end, it's like 3:45 or something like that. So, but this happens for many months. So, I mean, he's tried everything that, because people notice, oh my gosh, you look like you haven't gotten any sleep. And he says, no, I haven't. And so, they give him all a bunch of home remedy type things, and he tries those, and nothing works. So, after months of doing this, he's kind of starting to lose his mind, and, where he thinks he sees things and, different things like that. And one of the things that he begins to see is kind of like colors around different people in the town, or like their auras. He sees, there are some people have different colored auras. Like, he talks about green aura and gray aura and, blue or red aura, and things like that. But one of the things that he notices is, he's up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's looking out his window, and he sees a neighbor's house, and he sees little men go out his neighbor's house. And he gets really, because they're little bald men, and they're carrying scissors. And he's really concerned, because he's like, oh my gosh, something could have happened to this woman. And it's an elderly woman. And so he calls the police, and he's like, okay, this is going to sound crazy, but little men just came out of this woman's house. And so they go investigate, and it turns out that the woman has died. And so Ralph, again, starts to go crazy and thinks, because nobody else can see these little men. And so he tells his neighbor, Bill McGovern, about it, and Bill McGovern thinks, again, that Ralph is crazy, and he kind of overreacts. But Bill is going through a bunch of other stuff, because there's another death of a friend. There's lots of, like, little deaths in this book, kind of like that. But Ralph tells his friend Lois Chass about it. And Lois is, she's a little younger than Ralph. Ralph is, I believe, 70, and Lois is in her 60s. And Lois confides in Ralph that she is suffering from insomnia too. And they're like, well, you know, are you seeing this? Ralph's like, do you see the same things I do? Do you see these auras? And she's like, well, yes, I do. And so eventually throughout the thing, she starts to see these little doctors, the little bald doctors, which is what Ralph calls them. And eventually he and Lois can talk to these. They talk to two of them. There's three of them in total. Two of them are somewhat nice. Their names are Clothos and Lachesis. And then there's another one who's a little meaner. His name is Atropos. Now, if those names are familiar to you, if you are familiar with Greek mythology, those are the names of the Fates. And that's what basically they are. These are little men who's just in charge of, you know, making the universe go on, and they cut the cords off people, and once their cord is cut, they die. So they help people die, essentially. You know, if you're familiar with, like, the Disney movie Hercules, that's where you see the three Fates. I don't think they're named, but they're there, and they're in Greek mythology type things. So, anyway, so, again, Clothos and Lachesis are nice, I guess. They're the ones that, okay, you know, this is just what we do, and you can't change us, and all that. But then there's another one named Atropos, like I said, and he's meaner. When he encounters Ralph, he's very mean. Like, he yells out all sorts of obscenities, and he's like, don't get in my way, you're just here to ruin things. And he begins to talk, and Ralph realizes that Atropos is also being seen by Ed Deepno, because Ed Deepno is also seeing auras and seeing little bald doctors and things like that. But Ed is taking another route by that, where he's now going crazy, and he's thinking that about, you know, stopping anti-abortionist, because there's a separate little thing where a pro-abortionist lady named Susan Day is coming to Derry to give a talk. This isn't the same Susan Day from the Partridge Family. That's what I kept thinking of. Anyway, pretty soon, Ralph and Lois figure out that Ed Deepno is on a kamikaze mission to stop Susan Day from speaking, to where Ed gets a plane, because he's been taking flight lessons, and decides to, you know, run this plane into the Derry Civic Center, which is where Susan Day is doing the speech. So now Ed and Ralph and Lois have to stop Ed, because, you know, they're like, he's gonna kill Susan Day, plus, you know, all of these people who are at the Civic Center. And this is where, like, Atropos is like, no, you can't do this, because this needs to happen. And part of Atropos, along with Atropos, is this figure called the Crimson King, which you will know from Stephen King's Dark Tower series. Insomnia really has to do a lot with Dark Tower, so if you are you would understand what's going on if you're familiar with the Dark Tower series. But if you don't, if you're not familiar with that, this would be kind of hard to, like, compute, hard to figure out. But Ed thinks that he is doing this to kill Susan Day. But according to the Crimson King, who is really, you know, in the back of Ed, or inside Ed's head, he is doing this to kill this little boy named Patrick Danville, which, again, is also part of the Dark Tower series. So, again, I don't want to say people are saved, because he does eventually hit the Civic Center. I mean, less people are killed than they should be, or than they would have been. But I liked it. It was an okay book. Again, it was kind of hard to understand, because I'm like, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on that circulate about, like, randomness and purpose, and I mean, that I understand, but I'm not a big person on, like, auras, so I don't understand that. But, you know, if you are and you like that type of stuff, then you'd understand what's going on. So, the next book that I'm going to read is the newest Stephen King book. It just so happened that my hold at the library came in, so I figured, okay, this is my chance to read this book, because by the time that I'm there chronologically, I might not get it. So that's what I'm going to read next, and I bid you all farewell and happy reading.